Junko Furuta. Junko Furuta was a Japanese high school student whose case became one of the most disturbing crimes in modern Japanese history. In 1988, she was abducted by a group of teenagers in Tokyo and held captive in a private home for several weeks. During that time, she was subjected to relentless violence and humiliation while many people in the house knew what was happening but did not intervene. The case shocked Japan because of the extreme cruelty involved and the young age of both the victim and the perpetrators. It forced a national conversation about youth crime, bystander responsibility, and weaknesses in the justice system. Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Likens was a 16-year-old girl from Indiana whose death in 1965 revealed a prolonged pattern of abuse that occurred inside a suburban home. She had been left in the care of a woman named Gertrude Banashevsky while her parents traveled for work. Over the following months, Sylvia was systematically tortured and humiliated, not only by the woman responsible for her care, but also by several neighborhood children who were encouraged to participate. The cruelty escalated slowly, often in plain sight of others. When the truth emerged, the case stunned the United States and led to lasting changes in child abuse awareness and legal protections for minors. Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old African-American boy whose murder in Mississippi in 1955 became a defining moment in the American civil rights movement. While visiting relatives in the segregated South, he was accused of offending a white woman in a local store. Shortly afterward, he was abducted by two white men and brutally killed. His mother made the decision to hold an open-casket funeral so the world could see the violence that had been done to her son. Photographs of the funeral spread across the country and exposed the reality of racial terror in the United States, helping fuel a growing movement demanding justice and equality. Kitty Genovese. Kitty Genovese was a young woman who was murdered in New York City in 1964 in a case that later became strongly associated with the concept of the bystander effect. She was attacked near her apartment building late at night, and early reports claimed that numerous witnesses heard or saw parts of the incident but failed to call for help. Although later investigations showed that the situation was more complicated than first reported, the story sparked widespread debate about urban isolation and public responsibility. Psychologists began studying why people sometimes hesitate to intervene when others are present, making the case an important moment in social psychology. James Bulger. James Bulger was a 2-year-old boy from England whose death in 1993 deeply shook the United Kingdom. He was taken from a shopping center in Liverpool by two 10-year-old boys and later killed. What made the case especially horrifying to the public was the extremely young age of the perpetrators. Security camera footage showing the small child being led away by the two older boys circulated widely and became one of the most haunting images in British criminal history. The case raised difficult questions about childhood behavior, criminal responsibility, and how society should handle violent crimes committed by children. Matthew Shepard. Matthew Shepard was a 21-year-old university student in Wyoming whose murder in 1998 became a symbol of the dangers faced by LGBTQ individuals. He was targeted because of his sexual orientation and attacked by two men who left him severely injured in a remote area. The brutality of the crime and the prejudice behind it drew national and international attention. Vigils, protests, and discussions about hate crimes followed across the United States. In the years after his death, his name became closely connected with efforts to strengthen laws addressing crimes motivated by bias and discrimination. Shanda Sharer. Shanda Sharer was a 12-year-old girl from Indiana. Her story in 1992 drew attention across the country and became one of the most widely discussed cases of that time. Late at night, she was lured from her home by people she trusted. After that, she spent several hours with a group of teenagers who drove her to different places and treated her very cruelly. The events of that night lasted a long time and eventually ended in tragedy. What especially shocked the public was that very young people were involved. The case received widespread attention and made many people reflect on the fact that dangerous situations can sometimes arise even within very young social groups. Gabriel Fernandez. Gabriel Fernandez was an 8-year-old boy from California whose death in 2013 revealed a long history of severe abuse that had gone unnoticed or unaddressed by multiple systems meant to protect children. He lived with his mother and her partner, who repeatedly subjected him to physical violence and degrading treatment over many months. Teachers and social workers had reported signs of abuse, but the responses were fragmented and ineffective. When the full story became public, it sparked widespread outrage and led to investigations into failures within child protective services. The case remains a painful example of how vulnerable children can fall through gaps in systems designed to safeguard them. Toyin Salau. Toyin Salau was a 19-year-old activist from Florida, whose death in 2020 drew national attention during a period of intense social discussion about violence and justice. She had been active in protests and openly shared her experiences online, including a disturbing account of being assaulted shortly before her disappearance. Days later, she was reported missing, and authorities eventually discovered that she had been killed by a man she had encountered while seeking help. The case resonated widely because it highlighted the vulnerability of young people facing homelessness and exploitation, even as they tried to speak out about injustice. Brianna Ghey. Brianna Ghey was a 16-year-old girl from England whose killing in 2023 deeply affected communities across the United Kingdom. She was a transgender teenager known among friends for her creativity and online presence. After arranging to meet acquaintances in a park, she was attacked and killed in a violent assault carried out by 2 other teenagers. The crime quickly became a major national story, raising serious discussions about bullying, online radicalization, and the safety of transgender youth. Vigils were held across the country as people reflected on the impact of hatred and the need for stronger protection of vulnerable young people.